Kelly Nelson, episode 6, touchdowns to Turnbuckles, the AFL. What is going on, buddy?
Hey, happy New Year to everybody out there. This is our penultimate episode. One more to go right before the Super Bowl. So yeah, this one's about the AFL. And yeah, it should be interesting. Some fun guys to talk about. One guy that's super obscure to talk about. This will be fun, man.
Kelly, why don't you give us a little background on the AFL before we jump into the guys?
Yeah, I figured we don't need to go in too depth like we did with the Edmonton Eskimos or the CFL or whatever. The AFL was formed in 1960 by a group of individuals who basically wanted expansion teams into the NFL, but the NFL wouldn't allow them. They did. I don't think the NFL wanted to even expand at all at that point. But I think the long game was always by the AFL guys was to eventually force a merger, which they did. So they started in 1960, a bit of a rough start. The early years where some teams struggled mightily, that's for sure. The New York Titans played in the old Polo Grounds, which was a decrepit stadium, baseball stadium for years with the New York Giants before they left for San Francisco for baseball. And they were so unsuccessful, they basically rebranded as the Jets and started almost from scratch. And then they played in Shea Stadium, which was new. But they survived their rough early days, got a new contract with NBC that helped a lot. And then they started definitely fighting over draft picks with the NFL for the top guys coming in. The most famous one being Joe Namath, who the Jets signed. That was definitely wanted by the NFL. It was a huge star coming out of college, coming out of Alabama. And not too long after that, probably a year later, they finally did the merger with the two sides agreeing to come together. It took about 4 years for them to integrate the schedules, but they did play the Super Bowl that first year after the merger, the first Super Bowl. Well, it wasn't even called the Super Bowl at first for the first couple of years. And then in 1970, they fully integrated, and we get the AFC, which was the AFL. The NFL is the NFC. To combine, they're the NFL. The NFL had to send over 3 teams to the AFL to balance things out. That was Pittsburgh, the Baltimore Colts, and the Cleveland Browns. And then you had the NFC, AFC, and the combined NFL in 1970. So that's a short history of the AFL. And today we're talking about guys, future pro wrestlers who made their fame in the AFL, some more than others, for sure. 2 biggies, and then 2 guys that are like marginal. But I looked for better options, couldn't really find them. But here we are. The 2 biggies are worth doing the episode alone, that's for sure. But it's also interesting to talk about some of these guys that are the one guy that's totally unknown. So yeah, let's get right into it.
And everyone, that was right off the cuff. Kelly wasn't even prepped for that.
I know. I mean,
who he is.
Yeah, I have a great general knowledge of a lot of things, and pro football history is one of them.
Especially the AFL in the 1960s. Kudos to you, buddy. All right, let's jump right into the list here, buddy. All right, Kelly, up here first, we have Wahoo McDaniel.
Yeah, Chief Wahoo, one of the bigger names that we've discussed in this whole long journey as far as a wrestling star, but he was also a significant football star, as we'll see here. So Wahoo was born Edward Hugh McDaniel, June 19th, 1938, in Bernice, Louisiana. And his football height and weight were 6'1" and 235 pounds. And yeah, he eventually ended up in Oklahoma, and he went to the University of Oklahoma from 1957 to 1959. So 3 years there. He had a really interesting college story that I just discovered as I was researching. Like, I knew he had gone to Oklahoma, but I didn't know the particulars. So he was a linebacker. and also right guard, I think, and also a punter. But that's actually more of his pro positions, because actually it seems like at the University of Oklahoma, he played mostly wide receiver and running back. I think he was a running back his first year, and then a wide receiver and a kick returner the other years. And the interesting thing about Wahoo at Oklahoma is he holds still to this day the record for a punt um, by a player at Oklahoma at 91 yards. And to add to that, he also returned a punt 92 yards for a touchdown in a game. And he also caught at one point an 86-yard TD pass. So at Oklahoma, he was the king of these huge yardage plays. And like I said, one record still stands to this day at the University of Oklahoma, which is saying a lot because Oklahoma is a storied program. So yeah, 57 to 59, that picture right there is from his days at Oklahoma, number 40. Looking like I wouldn't want to be in front of him, whereas he's barreling down the field.
He doesn't really look like a punter.
No, that's the thing, but we'll see. There's a picture of him punting, and yes, he definitely didn't fit the mold, at least of the modern punter, but things were different back then. There wasn't really too many specialist punters or even kickers. It usually went to somebody, whoever who was on the team who was the best kicker or punter. That was you, and it wasn't your specialty. But anyway, so Wahoo had a pretty successful career at Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a power. They had he missed out on their dynasty, though, because I believe 56 was their last national championship in the 50s. And then they didn't win another until the 70s. So he just missed out. Bill Watts, of course, was a teammate of his at Oklahoma, and we discussed that a few episodes ago. So he went to the AFL. He was drafted in the second round of the inaugural AFL draft in 1960 by the LA Chargers. And I couldn't find, he didn't actually play for the LA Chargers. He was drafted by them. I don't know what happened, but he ended up with the Houston Oilers in 1960, and only 1 year with the Houston Oilers. And then he ended up in Denver with the Broncos for 3 seasons, 1961, 62, and 63. And then he went to the New York Jets, 64, 65. That's definitely a picture of him from the New York Jets. And it was in New York. Well, actually, I'll say one more thing. He played for the Dolphins too. 66, 67, 68. 66 was the Dolphins' first year. That was their expansion year. So he was a member of the expansion Miami Dolphins. So all told, he played 9 years. 9 out of the 10 years that the AFL was its own a distinct league, which is impressive. And he played for 4 different teams. So beginning in 1964, though, with the Jets, he did a cool thing. He started wearing Wahoo on the back of his jersey instead of McDaniel, which was, I don't know if this was something a lot of players in the AFL did, putting nicknames on the back, or if Wahoo was unique. It was already his nickname. The fans would chant Wahoo, Wahoo at games. He was a fan favorite in New York, and he started wrestling in 1961, but he wrestled when he was in New York. It was actually the only time he ever wrestled for the McMahon family was when he played for the Jets those 2 seasons. He never went back. And there we see him punting. That's him with the Miami Dolphins, though. And yeah, he was a big boy. You can see clearly Wahoo on the back. And actually blocking the punt was Marty Schottenheimer, future head coach. Oh, wow. Yeah, and at this time he was playing for the Buffalo Bills. And Marty Schottenheimer would become a successful regular season coach, if nothing else, in the 80s and 90s, but was known for his lack of playoff success as a coach. Anyway, so like I said, yeah, Wahoo started wrestling in 61. So, just after he started pro football, he was trained by Dory Funk Sr. So there's a connection there with the West Texas side of things. Yeah, and probably he wrestled in Amarillo, in the old Amarillo territory at first. And yeah, like I said, he wrestled. He was a solid mid-carder in New York. in the 60s, in the mid 60s, but it was after he left and actually in Florida. So while he was playing for the Dolphins, he became a big star in the Florida territory in the late 60s. And then in the 70s into the 80s, Wahoo was a huge star. That's one of his trading cards. Again, wearing a Jets jersey, but it's for the Dolphins because that would have came out before, I guess, the Dolphins had even played a game since they were an expansion team. So, yeah, looking good there. And, yeah, like I said, he was a major wrestling star from the 60s to the 80s. We're going to be looking, I mean, he was mostly a star in the Southern Territories, but also a star in the AWA. And we're going to be looking at a match of his from the AWA in the 1980s. Yeah, known for his bloody brawls. He was one of the great bleeders. Many wrestling magazine covers with Wahoo's bloody face on them. We're going to talk about a match where he wore the crimson mask later. And he passed away over 20 years ago, April 18th, 2002. Unfortunately, the story is he didn't really take care of himself over the years. He liked to party. And when his health started to fail him, he didn't really do anything to correct that. He just kept on partying. And unfortunately, yeah, passed away at quite a young age. He was only, just in his early 60s. But yeah, memorable football player and a very famous pro wrestler. That's Wahoo McDaniel.
Kelly Nelson up next is Ron Pritchard. Tell us about this unknown of Ron.
Yeah, this is, like you said, probably the most unknown guy we've talked about since Buckets Goldenberg. Yeah, we didn't have any matches of Buckets. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, Wayne Munn. We didn't have any matches of Wayne to look at, and we don't have any matches of Ron Pritchard's to look at. I tried to find them, but they're just not out there, at least on YouTube. But he did play in the AFL and he did wrestle. So here we go. So he was born April 2nd, 1947 in Chicago. He too, like Wahoo, was 6'1" and 235 pounds, the exact same measurements. And yeah, he was a fairly well-known, maybe not well-known, but well-respected player. He was a linebacker like Wahoo, and he went to Arizona State from approximately 1965. Not sure the exact time he started, but he went until 1968. 1968 was definitely his last year in college. And he was renowned enough in college to be inducted into the College Hall of Fame in 2003. So that's nothing to sneeze at. And he has a connection. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about him was his connection to Wayne Coleman, aka superstar Billy Graham. And when he was still going to Arizona State, him and the future superstar Graham, bounced at the same bar in Arizona, around the Arizona State area, and became friends that way. And it was actually Pritchard that suggested to superstar Graham to go to Calgary and become a pro wrestler, even though Graham, as we talked about, went to Calgary before to play football. But coincidentally, he went back home to Arizona and then went back to Calgary for a completely different reason, to become a wrestler. The two weren't related at all. But it was because of Pritchard, because Pritchard had already got into wrestling and was trained by Stu Hart, just like superstar Billy would be. Back to his football days, he was, like I said, highly regarded coming out of college. He was drafted 15th overall in the 1969 NFL draft by the Houston Oilers, so pretty high. And this was a common. The AFL and NFL had agreed to a merger. They were doing the Super Bowl, and they'd also instituted a common draft, even though the schedules wouldn't be integrated into the following year. So both leagues were drafting at this time. Houston Oilers, there's an action shot of Pritchard. I love those old Oilers helmets with the baby blue. Very cool. Looks like he's maybe forcing a fumble with that tackle. not too bad, on someone from the New York Jets. And yeah, so he counts as an AFL guy because 1969 was the last year that the AFL was its own separate league, and they didn't have a common schedule with the NFL. And then 1970 was the first year of the common schedule. So he just barely squeaks in as an AFL guy. His first year, his rookie year, 1969. He played 4 seasons with the Oilers, 69 to 72. And then he ended up with the Cincinnati Bengals, also a AFL franchise, although an expansion AFL franchise. They were the last team to be added to the AFL before the merger. I think their first year was 1968. And yeah, so he did play for 2 AFL franchises, although by the time he played for the Bengals, they were part of the NFL. He played for the Bengals for 6 seasons, 1972 to 1977. So he had a pretty long football career, 69 through 77. Here he is with a trading card, linebacker with the Bengals. And like I said, he was trained by Stu Hart and began wrestling in the off-season, football off-season in 1970. And as far as I can tell, he only wrestled until 1974, at least as like a regular off-season wrestler. And there's there was a record of him wrestling as late as 1981 in a battle royal in San Francisco. But I think he only came for a few spots here and there after 1974. So he didn't have a long career, but I think they used his football fame to push him, which was always something wrestling promoters love to do, to show this is a real tough guy from football. Wrestling is obviously on par with these guys. It gave wrestling legitimacy back in those days when kayfabe was strictly enforced and stuff like that mattered. In that picture, he's with a guy we're going to be talking about at the end, Ernie Ladd. And in the middle, the lady is Ann Gunkel. She was the promoter of All South Wrestling in Georgia, which is an interesting story in its own right, but I won't get into it here. One of the reasons there isn't footage of Pritchard out there is he was with some companies that there really isn't any footage of. There's very little of All South out there. And also because he was mostly done by 1974. It was basically 1975 onwards was where you started getting more and more footage available, and then you had VCRs and people taping it. So he missed the VCR era. So unfortunately, I'm sure there is footage of him out there. It's just not on YouTube. It's my new holy grail to find a Ron Pritchard match. But anyway, he was a fairly accomplished football player, and I think he was like a mid-card at best. Maybe he had some main events. I'm not too sure as a wrestler, but he had that AFL connection. And he's a college football Hall of Famer. So that's great. Right. He's still living. And maybe this will begin a deeper appreciation into the career of Ron Pritchard as both a wrestler and a football player.
I love it, Kelly. I love it. All right, let's go check out the next. Kelly Nelson, a guy that looks like everyone's uncle, Blackjack Mulligan. Tell us all about him.
Yeah, that's true. For me, it's more some cousins of mine and my brother look like Blackjack Mulligan, and I'm trying my best to look like Blackjack Mulligan these days too. But I don't think I can.
Head on you. You'd be all right.
Yeah. Well, I'm I grew up in Calgary, so that I should have a cowboy hat, but I don't. And I love this picture because he has the classic U.S. title, like Wahoo did in the picture for him. So I always love a chance to display that belt. Anyway, so this is another one sort of had to stretch on to count as an AFL guy. Anyway, Blackjack was born Robert Wyndham, November 25th, 1942, in Sweetwater, Texas. and he was a giant of a man, 6'9", 280 pounds. And now this
Wow.
guy, of all the guys we've talked about before, and probably we'll talk about after, has the most mysterious football career. I couldn't find a single picture of him playing football, for one, so I had to get creative with the picture choices. And two, I couldn't find what position Blackjack played. Just nowhere. I looked on the internet, different sources, books that I had, and I just couldn't find a mention of any position. But I think we have a spot for him. Anyway, he went to Texas Western College, and that's the logo you see there. They're now known as UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. They were once renowned for their basketball. I mean, Texas Western famously in 1966 defeated the University of Kentucky in the championship game for the NCAA tournament, and they famously had an all-black starting lineup, which was, unprecedented at that time. And they went against the all-white Kentucky team, and it's looked at as sort of like a symbol of the civil rights era of that time. It was 1966. So that's what Texas Western College was most known for. Eventually, they became UTEP. Blackjack played for them in the early 60s. Just basically, I'm guessing this because I couldn't find any exact dates, but based on when he played for the Jets, it had to be there. Apparently, it was only for a couple years. And apparently, he was pretty good because he got to at least try out for the New York Jets in 1966 and played with them in the 1966 preseason. And I believe he broke his leg during the preseason, as the story goes. Anyway, I'm not sure if he was going to make the team or not. And that's a program from 1966. And I didn't notice it at first, but it's with the Jets against the Boston Patriots. So
Boston Patriots.
you must like that. Yeah, that's what the Patriots were known as, I think, for their whole run in the AFL before they switched to the more general New England, I guess, to appeal to everybody in the region. Well, and they weren't playing in Boston anymore because they used to play in Fenway Park. Yeah, that would have been interesting to see some games, how they squeezed a football field into that park. But they used to do. I mean,
they still do it. They play a bowl game there every year, and it was
that's right.
Boston College versus, I'll think of it before at the end of the podcast. But yeah, they just played it this year.
Right. They've done it in a few places like Yankee Stadium, Wrigley Field. But back in the day, those baseball stadiums were in a lot of, like, maybe the majority were where the football teams played their games, because the football was playing catch up in popularity. Baseball was established. So there wasn't enough money to justify like a football only stadium at first. So you had the New York Giants played in Yankee Stadium. Chicago Bears played in Wrigley Field. Detroit Lions played in Tiger Stadium. And then the Boston Patriots played in Fenway Park.
They played SMU as we get out of here. They played SMU. So a team that we've talked about in the past.
Yes. That
I knew it was familiar to us. That's why I wanted to look it up.
Come up a few times. Fritz von Erich's alma mater. And so that's a program from 1966, the year that Blackjack played in the preseason for the Jets. But he went no further. Like I said, he broke his leg, and he did apparently have tryouts for the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. And I think the Saints didn't exist until 1967. So that would have been a year later. So he still tried to give it a go as a professional football player for a couple of years, but it just didn't work out despite his immense size. But he got into wrestling, of course, and he got into wrestling because of Wahoo McDaniel, who has become like the human butterfly effect for a lot of these guys. Like if Wahoo wasn't a wrestling fan or a wrestler, you wouldn't have had Bill Watts get into wrestling, arguably, and then Blackjack Mulligan as well. So Wahoo was very influential. Of course, he would have played with Wahoo. Wahoo would have been gone to the Dolphins in 66. So they weren't on the Jets at the same time. But anyway, he met him at some point there, got into wrestling, and then he has Blackjack has more connections to guys we've talked about in the past. He was initially trained by Joe Blanchard, so Tully's father, who played for the Edmonton Eskimos. And then later, Vern Gagne trained a young Big Bob Wyndham, as he was known originally. That's the youngest, the youngest picture I could find of Blackjack. So that's roughly what he would have looked like as a football player, because that's from basically his first year as a wrestler, I believe. So he started around 1969. Those are the earliest results I could find as a wrestler, and wrestled until 1989 with, I think, maybe a couple matches, comeback matches. He was definitely on the first Slamboree card in I think it was a 6-man tag. That was in 1993. But his body broke down quite early. By the mid 80s, he was, if you've seen any Blackjack Mulligan matches from around that time, they're not pretty. We're going to talk about a match that he had from 1978, when he was still in his peak form as a wrestler. And I think he accounted himself quite well. He was a major wrestling star in the 70s and 80s. There's a great cover. I've had that image saved on my phone long before the touchdowns to Turnbuckles was even an idea. I had that because I came across that online. It's just awesome. I love the bloody covers from that era. Harley Race is the one who's the victim of the claw. That was Blackjack's finisher too, just like the Von Erichs. But Blackjack's gimmick was with the black glove, and the black glove was loaded, and it would make the claw more dangerous. But yeah, Harley Race is just bleeding buckets there. Blackjack was also bleeding. So great cover. Yeah, Blackjack was a big star in the 70s and 80s. And of course, was the father of Barry Windham and the whole family that came from that. So you can say that the Windham sort of family dynasty or whatever. Definitely a lot of pro wrestlers came out of that. And he lived until April 7th, 2016. And yeah, so a brief cup of coffee in the AFL, but a cup of coffee nonetheless for Blackjack Mulligan.
Kelly, the last guy we got here is the big cat, Ernie Ladd. Tell us all about Ernie.
Yeah, like you said, the big cat. There he is, number 99, rocking his Kansas City Chiefs colors at that point as a wrestler. And yeah, probably, I guess, Ladd would be the biggest football star we've talked about since Bronco Nagurski way back in episode 1, because Ladd had a pretty accomplished run in the AFL in the 1960s. He was born November 28th, 1938 in Rayville, Louisiana. Like Blackjack Mulligan, he was also 6'9" and about the same weight, 290 pounds. Yes, he was a massive man. One of the tallest, I think at the time, probably tallest football players ever, and was one of the taller wrestlers for the entirety of his wrestling career. So he played defensive tackle at Grambling State, famous college, black college, in the late 1950s, early 60s. And he was pretty highly regarded coming out of college. There he is with the Chargers. Great. He was super young at that time. He was drafted by the Chicago Bears in the 4th round, 48th overall, and by the San Diego Chargers in the 15th round, 119th overall in the 1961 draft. And I think the story goes that he was planning on signing with the Bears with the established NFL, but the AFL, because they were the junior league, they had to be more aggressive, courting draft picks, getting them to sign, and they were very aggressive with Ladd. They basically, kidnapped him, as he would put it, and kept him away from any Bears people from the Bears organization, and made sure he signed a contract with the Chargers. He was probably offered more money, and yeah, he went to the Chargers, which it would have been interesting him going to the Bears, because the Bears in the early 60s were still, quite good, still coached by George Halas, known for their defense. Would have been interesting to see him on the Chicago Bears defense, but he went to the Chargers and was an immediate star. He played for the Chargers for 5 years, 61 to 65, and most of his accolades in the AFL come from his days with the Chargers, where he was a 4-time All-Star, 3-time All-Pro. But he moved on. He went to the Houston Oilers, 1966-67, and then midway through the 67 season, I guess he was traded to the Chiefs, Kansas City Chiefs, and played with them for the rest of 67 and 1968. And unfortunately didn't go one more year, because if he did and stayed on the Chiefs, he would have been a Super Bowl champion, because in 1969, the Chiefs won Super Bowl IV over the Minnesota Vikings. So yeah, Ernie missed out on a Super Bowl by 1 year. He played almost the entirety of the NFL or AFL's existence. Well, it's 8 years, 61 to 68. He is a member of the Chargers Hall of Fame and the Chargers 50th anniversary team. I thought he was also a member of the AFL All 1960s team. I remember hearing that or reading that before, but I couldn't find that this time around. But anyway, yeah, he was a highly regarded football player, as the accolades. And he got into wrestling right away. His first year as a pro football player, he also got into wrestling in California with the old LA territory. And he was a babyface for quite a few years, because he's a football star. And yeah, usually you would be a babyface if you're a football star or still playing football. But the Ernie Ladd everybody knows and hates was a heel, and one of the great heels of the 1970s. I think it was right at the end of the 60s, right at the end of his football career, maybe even after his football career had ended, that he went heel for the first time. And I think it was in New York for Vince Sr., and had a big run with Bruno at that time. He would be brought back multiple times to the New York territory, to the WWF in the 70s. I think he had a run with Pedro Morales. He definitely had a second run with Bruno. We're going to be talking about that in a bit. But yeah, he was a major, major wrestling star that, yeah, like I said, like comparing him to Bronco Nagurski, they were both like their football fame and their wrestling fame were almost equal. They were stars in both. And he was the king of wrestling. He'd often wear a crown. His promos are great. If you can find some of his old 70s promos, there's a classic one with a young Vince McMahon where he just, he was just, yeah, you may have saw it.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been, it was highlighted on the WWE network, and it's quite well known. But yes, he was a great talker. Not so much a great, when he retired from wrestling and went into commentary, for some reason that just didn't transfer. His talking ability. He was not a great commentator, much like superstar Billy Graham too. Graham, of course, was a great promo, but not a good wrestling commentator for whatever reason. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of cliches and just no substance at all. But anyway, yeah, Ernie Ladd, one of the greats that we've talked about, one of the great heels in wrestling history. And he passed away March the 10th, 2007. And yeah, so that's the AFL, Ryan. We've like I said, we had two biggies, Wahoo and Ernie, and then two kind of questionable guys, but still we had to talk about Wahoo and Ernie because they accomplished as much in pro football as any of the guys we've talked about so far.
Yeah, really two pillar guys as we kind of build up our depth chart. Speaking of that depth chart, Kelly, let's jump right into it. All right, Kelly, we are here with the depth chart, like I just said, and let's start with an easy one. Big Cat Ernie Ladd, he, as you just talked about, he's a stud. Now, would you put him over Ron Simmons as a defensive tackle, or is Ron Simmons still our dude at defensive tackle?
I think the tiebreaker has to go to pro success, and Ernie had a lot of pro success. Of course, Ron didn't. So yeah, it was as much as, Ron was a very accomplished, and the size, yeah, of course. Ron was a very accomplished college player, but Big Cat did it on the biggest stage, or second biggest stage, but a big stage nonetheless.
Very good. And then Wahoo, he's kind of a swing guy here. Would you prefer him on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball?
Well, linebacker was his, prime position. We can definitely use him to punt.
Yes.
We could use more receivers. He didn't play receiver in the AFL, but he was a receiver in college with Oklahoma. So that, it's tempting to put him in wide receiver since we have 0 wide receivers as of this moment. Linebacker, well, we're gonna need at least 2.
Yeah.
I mean, we could. We're talking about a lot of old school guys. Wahoo could definitely go 2 ways if we need to play offense and defense. But yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. All right, we'll leave him here, and we'll make our final decision. Perhaps he plays both ways, and then Pritchard. Would you put him ahead of Wahoo? What do you think?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because Wahoo was no slouch in the AFL. Pritchard had a long career. Neither, I think, had any accolades. Like, so there's no tiebreaker. Like, if say one of them had made the Pro Bowl, we could say, well, that's the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
But neither played on a Pro Bowl or an All Pro or any of that. Well, I mean, let's use the tiebreaker as the wrestling accomplishments, and that's an easy one.
We'll go Wahoo.
Yeah, Wahoo is much more accomplished as a wrestler.
Usually on the defensive side of the ball, you have like a Mike, which is your strong side, and then you have another middle linebacker, which kind of call him a whip, and they kind of do the same thing, but the stronger ones, to the strength of the defense. So we'll figure that out, later on. And then Blackjack Mulligan here, we kind of just felt that offensive tackle being 6'9", excuse me, was probably the best place for him, and it's a need too because we got little old Bill Watts there. So I think it's safe if we just kind of put him ahead of Bill and we stick him right at right tackle, and we have Lex Luger as our left tackle. Easy
there
day.
You go. Yeah. I think that's an easy call. Definitely by his size, he could fit right in there. We don't have to make things complicated.
And looking here with 1 episode left, I think it's easy to say that our strength is easily our defense still, especially our defensive line. Our offensive line seems to be okay. Our running back is obviously probably our best player, Nagurski. And then we'll kind of figure it out as we go. Wrestling wise, our tight ends are fun. 1985 written all over it. Tito Santana and Paul Orndorff. But it's pretty cool how we got going on here. We also have a swing of Dory Funk Jr. We could put an offensive tackle too that we talked about earlier. So we'll see next episode what we kind of decide to do at the end here.
Yeah. We still need a secondary. We'll have to. We'll have to be creative.
I got ideas.
You got ideas. I'll leave it in your hands.
I got ideas. All right, Kelly. Let's jump over to the match recommendations. Okay, Kelly. We didn't really go out and get recommendations from other people as we're kind of talking about the 60s and the 70s here, and the footage really isn't that deep. So we just kind of left it in your hands to give one recommendation for Ernie, Blackjack, and Wahoo. And like you said earlier in the episode, there wasn't much on Pritchard. So the first match you recommend here is from Wahoo. It is Wahoo McDaniels versus Nick Bockwinkel in a singles match for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship on August 28th, 1983 for the AWA in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is 19 minutes. And Kelly, I thought this was decent. I don't have my star rating in here, and I went 3.5 stars. I thought it was solid, and Wahoo was actually pretty impressive. And this is later on in his career too. And of course, Bockwinkel is a stud. They had the big lights and the big curtains of a title match in AWA country. But overall, I thought Wahoo, especially his strikes, was rather impressive, as I not really have honestly watched a lot of him. What did you think of this match, Kelly?
I'm a big fan of this match. I'd seen it before. It's one of like in the PWO circles, it's one of Wahoo's more highly regarded matches. It was I think a find of the AWA set that Goodwill put together about a decade ago. It's a fan cam match. It was shot, I guess, by someone in the crowd. So we don't have commentary.
Yeah, it
There's
was
no,
one camera shot.
yeah. But still, it's good. Like they catch pretty much everything. It was a no disqualification match, so we have tons of violence, chairs being used. Wahoo bleeds, like I said, that was one of his specialties. And yeah, I mean, I love Bockwinkel too. So yeah, this was really good. When I went 4 stars, I thought about 3.5, but I mean, if you have gritty violence, blood, just a feeling of like this is two guys that hate each other. I love those kind of matches. So that bumped it up for me to 4. I love the finish that, this was a no DQ match. So chairs were legal. So Bockwinkel just waffles Wahoo with a chair. And then instead of just pinning him, he actually gets on top of him and punches him in the face and then pins him. So that was great. Like, so how many matches end with a punch to the face like that as a finisher? Great finish.
I'm probably pretty low on this. Like I said, maybe I perhaps was distracted while watching it, but I felt that this had the most energy. And this is probably the match I enjoyed the most out of these 3 for sure. Yeah. I thought Wahoo looked excellent, like I said earlier. So it's interesting. I didn't know that good old Will found this one, and now that you say it was a fan recording, it makes a lot of sense. Perhaps maybe where if that was more slickly recorded, it probably would have helped the quality of the video in the match, of course. So interesting stuff. Now, real quick, where was Wahoo in his career here in 1983? He's probably on the back 9, right? How is he relatively, do you think?
I think, like, as far as his reputation at the time, he was still considered a top guy, a main eventer. But yeah, he was starting to show his age, and by the end of the 80s, he was done. But he still, like, as this match shows, he had still a bit in the tank, and then didn't look out of place. I mean, Bockwinkel was equally old at this point in time, actually older. Because Bockwinkel was nearing 50 at this point. The AWA was, a territory kind of made up of a lot of old guys at this time, which is one of the big criticisms they get for the end of their run in the 80s, is that they had too many old guys. But this was good. But yeah, I mean, there's a great match if you want to look more into Wahoo from 1978, Houston. Okay. It's easily available on YouTube against Harley Race for the NWA title, and it's a great match. So that one's out there for sure. But yeah, Wahoo kind of fell into that. He has a legendary feud with Johnny Valentine that people always talk about, but that happened at a time when pre-VCR. There's some stuff out there from the garbage tapes. We're going to be talking about a garbage tape match in a second here. From the Carolinas in the 70s. But yeah, so yeah, look out for the Harley Race match from 78. I thought about recommending that one too. It was a coin flip between this one and the Bockwinkel one, because I really like both. But I hadn't seen this one in a long time, so I wanted to see if it held up, and I thought it did.
No, for sure. Good stuff. All right, the next guy we have is Ernie Ladd, the Big Cat, versus Bruno Sammartino in a title match for the WWF Championship on March 1st, 1976, and the WWF Madison Square Garden, New York, 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Kelly, I thought that this was good, but perhaps a bit boring to an extent for maybe modern eyes, but I definitely felt the aura and the star power and the history and the prestige of both these guys and the overness, really. I thought Cat looked good enough, but maybe a little plotting, so to speak. So I'm going to give this a gentleman's 3. What did you think of this, Kelly?
I gave it the exact same rating, 3. And I'm a huge Bruno guy. I picked this one because it's in full. It's during arguably Ladd's peak as a wrestler. It's a huge match, against Bruno for the WWF strap in New York and Madison Square Garden. And there isn't a ton of like prime Ladd footage out there either, kind of like Wahoo. And yeah, plotting is a good description because I mean, clearly the years of football had wreaked havoc on Ernie Ladd. He was
like a little tight in the hips. Let's put it that way.
yeah. I mean, he was a guy who got by on his promo skills. He talked people into the building. You love to hate him.
Mhm.
People paid money to come see him lose. They weren't paying to come to see Ernie put on a 5-star work rate masterpiece. That wasn't his job. But yes, even compared to the Bruno opponents from this time, this is definitely one of the lesser matches. So hopefully this isn't the only Bruno match a lot of people watch because there's tons of great Bruno stuff out there. But Ladd, I could have maybe looked deeper to see what there was, but this one came to mind right away, and I hadn't watched it in a long time. And yeah, it was actually, it's one of the lesser of Bruno's matches from that era. But still, I mean, it showed Ernie's gimmick working with his taped thumb. That was his gimmick in wrestling for years and years, that the taped thumb was somehow like a deadly weapon, always to the throat of his adversaries. So this match, you got a ton of the taped thumb gimmick. The finish was pretty weak sauce with Bruno moving before Ladd even jumped off the top rope. You saw the finish coming a mile away. He misses the splash, and then Bruno immediately pins him. You could almost feel like Bruno thinking, okay, I've had enough. This is it. It's over. We're going home, Ernie. Because it was short, too. It was less than 10 minutes. Not that Bruno... Yeah, Bruno was not a guy that had to have short matches. He could work long matches, too. But yeah, this was a short one. And this was the only... I believe this was the only match that Ernie had at MSG against Bruno during this run. So that shows you that Vince Sr. didn't have a ton of faith in him, because usually you would get at least 2 if you were any kind of a heel of drawing power at the time. Sometimes you would get 3. So Ernie only got 1. So that says something. They brought him back when Backlund was champion in '78, and that match is out there. I think that match is better than this one, but it's been a long time since I've seen that one too. But anyway, it showcases Ladd. But unfortunately it's not a really sterling match to say, oh, I got to see more Ernie Ladd matches. That's for sure.
And from a historical standpoint, these are 2 massive, massive names. You know what I mean? So it's cool, but a little disappointing.
Yeah,
with the buildup of the massive names, but it is what it is, Kelly.
Yeah,
I would definitely check it out though. 9 minutes and 20 seconds. You're not going to waste your time. You wouldn't feel like you wasted your time.
No.
All right. And the last match we have here is Blackjack Mulligan versus the Masked Superstar in a lumberjack match from September 3rd, 1978. This is from Mid-Atlantic in Charlotte, North Carolina. 9 minutes and 45 seconds. Kelly, this felt that it was maybe perhaps like stitched together. It felt like it was like in and out at times. The quality was kind of poor at best. But man, the heat was electric. I felt maybe perhaps if I was more invested into the feud, I would have been more invested to the match. But I went 3 1/4 stars. Like I said, it was pretty good action, but a mix of the 2 matches. You know, we had the great work rate in the Wahoo match with Bockwinkel, and then we kind of had the plotting nature of the Bruno and Ernie match. I think this was maybe perhaps like a mix of it. But man, whenever Blackjack would fire up and go for that hammer, the crowd would even go up. And it felt like the crowd was like a piped in WWF crowd now during like the pandemic era, where they would just pipe in new noise constantly. But this like you said, no announcing. It felt like it was a 1 cam. Maybe Will threw this together and added crowd noise. I think we'll have to reach out and see. But overall, I thought it was good to an extent. I thought that maybe if I was more, like I said, if I was more invested into this feud, it felt hot. It just worked. It just felt like it was maybe room temperature instead of boiling. But that might be my investment. What do you think, Kelly?
The crowd heat was legit. This wasn't piped in. That's the first thing that hit me too, is like, oh man, these crowds were just so nuclear hot. This was the 70s was a glory period for the Carolinas, for Crockett. Blackjack Mulligan at this point had turned babyface and was basically the biggest babyface in the territory at the time, which, as if you watch this match, you can see the crowd is just going nuts. Women are jumping up and down. It's just nutty. Mass Superstar was a great heel. The future Demolition Axe, of course, Bill Eadie. And yeah, this was from the garbage tapes, which I referenced before. And the garbage tapes, the name comes from the fact they were recovered from the literal garbage by Jim Cornette in the 80s, when I think like a lot of this stuff had been filmed in the 70s. I'm not sure why it was filmed. I think some of it maybe was shown in clips on the TV shows. But anyway, there was a whole bunch of reels that whoever was in charge felt that there was no value to them, threw them in the garbage. Cornette, of course, had been a school or a wrestling historian, a student of wrestling history, and he knew what was being tossed away was valuable, so he recovered it, and then they started circulating from there. There's a lot out there on YouTube of various, some are like very short, just a couple minutes long. There's a very long Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair match with Andre the Giant as the referee from I think the same year, 78. That's almost, I think, maybe complete, but there's hardly any complete garbage tape matches. This one, we're definitely missing the beginning of the match, but I don't think too much was missing. And there's a few clips throughout. Like I said, and like you said, the crowd is just nuclear hot. It's a lumberjack match.
Yes.
Yeah, so you get a lot of action with the lumberjacks. You get fighting with the lumberjacks on the outside. I recognized Rene Goulet as one of the lumberjacks, who was Sergeant Jacques Goulet at the time. And I think Dick Murdoch's one of the lumberjacks out there, but a lot of guys I didn't recognize. Anyway, there's a slow part where I guess Mass Superstar's finish was the Cobra Clutch, and he had it on Mulligan for quite a long time. But cool ending. This apparently was a long feud. I read just a little bit about it last night. This was the culmination of quite a long feud. And Mulligan did rip off Superstar's mask at the end. But of course, he quickly left the ring, covered his face. It wasn't a mask, or the mask wasn't online, or maybe it was. I don't know. But Mask Superstar never lost his mask officially, as far as I know. And so that it was, it's a good snapshot, or a great snapshot of what was like a golden period for the Crockett territory, with nuclear crowds, with just like their roster at the time was who's who of Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, all in their primes. It was just a great time. So this one, like I said earlier, Mulligan, kind of like Ernie Ladd, doesn't have a ton of matches that make him look great on tape out there. So I thought this with Mass Superstar would be a good chance. Plus, I just wanted to see this match. I love Mass Superstar. I'd never seen this before. I didn't know what to give it if I should give it a rating or not. But it was almost complete. So I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. Definitely better.
If we were fully invested in the feud, and it just felt like it was stitched together, and it was kind of like a twitchy watch. But overall, you cannot deny that crowd heat and the excitement that they felt for this match. Good stuff. Great stuff, Kelly.
Yeah, for sure. This may be, we got the NFL guys next time, and it just occurred to me we may not have the greatest of matches to look at, but we need to end on a high note, so we'll see. I want to have at least one more like really awesome match to talk about, so we'll see what I can find for the NFL guys.
We'll figure it out, buddy. We'll figure it out. All right. But speaking of ending seasons, let's jump into our teams.
God.
Kelly, what is going on?
If we must.
Today, as of recording, we'll just get my sad snap out of the way. A legendary coach, probably the best coach in NFL, AFL, no pun intended, history of football, Bill Belichick. I don't think he's mutually parting ways. Perhaps, maybe one day we'll find out, but he seems to be no longer the coach of the New England Patriots. I think very quickly he will find a home, as he should. He's about 15 wins away from setting the all-time record in the NFL. I hope one day he gets that record. from that sneaky Don Shula, who is extremely overrated. But anyways, that's for another day. I'm curious where Bill ends up. I think Atlanta and Washington are probably the most likely outings. I think if I would put money on it, I would say Atlanta for sure. But then there's reports of a sneaky team, perhaps an NFC East team. Perhaps if the Dallas Cowboys do not have any success this weekend, that seems like a marriage that could work. Or perhaps if the Philadelphia Eagles and there's punk Nick Sirianni can't figure it out this weekend, hopefully Belichick could land there and direct them to an all-star cast of roster that he could propel them to where they need to go. So I'm curious who this mystery team is. The Chargers also make sense. I don't know, Kelly. I'm conflicted. It's kind of like Brady all over again.
Yeah.
Without the drama, because it's definitely the end of a era. And from the Patriots standpoint, it seems like Gerard Mayo was the pick all along. I don't think there's any collusion or anything. I just think that it's Jonathan's kind of team now. Bob seems to be on the back end of his involvement here. Of course, Jonathan wants to put his stamp on it. Why not go to a trusted hand that's been great to the organization, save a little face? Go Gerard Mayo, but there is a sparkly new toy out there with the name of Mike Vrabel, who has all the attributes of the old guard and the allure of the Patriots, but is a proven kick-ass motherfucking great coach. But he might. I don't know. I'm conflicted. I think it's going to end up Mayo. I prefer Vrabel, but either way, sad day, bad day, end of an era. I hope Belichick kind of winds up getting the record like he deserves. Greatest coach of all time, 6 Super Bowl champions with the Patriots. I could go on and gush about him all day. Him and Tom Brady will go down as the best tandem of all time, Kelly. And it was kind of good to vent about it all and just let it out, as it's kind of just been an overall meh kind of day from that aspect. But before we go to the meh Philadelphia Eagles, would you like to say any words for Bill? You were 1-1 versus him in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Thank God we got that one win.
Not really.
2-0 would have been so much sweeter, of course, since that would have given.
It's not like we got 700 fucking yards against you guys in 2017, and Bill let up fucking 41 points to whatever it was to friggin' Nick Foles. Anyways,
I know it was a magic moment for sure, and
someone call it a fucking special, a Philly special. All right, I'm done.
Hey, I mean, you've got 6 titles, share the wealth, buddy.
There's nothing better but 7. Only 7's better.
Lucky number 7. It also prevented you guys from having a three-peat, and nobody's ever three-peated. You won the next year. So anyway, Belichick, I mean, I can't say that I love the guy because, of course, the Eagles lost.
Better respect him. You
Brady
gotta respect him.
04. Well, of course I respect him. And I was just half jokingly thinking earlier today, now that he's free, that, the Eagles should shell out some money and just get him to be a defensive coordinator for the playoff game.
He's getting that head coaching record. Now, can I throw a scenario at you?
Borrow him. Just for the rest of however long this season is, just pay him, whatever. Lurie's got a lot of money. Just give him $5 million to come in and take over the defense.
Defensive ball.
Yeah,
all day.
I mean, I highly respect his defensive mind. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, everything always eventually comes to an end. What a crazy 2 days it's been with Saban, Carroll, and Belichick. These things come in threes. I guess that's the saying, and it's true. 3 big legends,
massive.
all either retiring or being pushed out the door in the span of 2 days. It would be. I can't believe Atlanta may be the team that Belichick ends up considering. Atlanta's, still hasn't gotten over the 28-3 choke job from that Super Bowl.
Kind of funny.
Would this be like their way of exercising the demons from that by bringing back the guy who did it to them? I don't know. Atlanta has a lot of talent. They need a quarterback, of course, but They got a lot of skilled offensive players, that's for sure.
Pretty good heralded offensive line too. How
Weak
about this
division.
little package? Bill Belichick is your head coach. Josh McDaniels as your offensive coordinator. Can't go wrong there. You can say what you want about him as a head coach. Not a leader, but he is a very good offensive coordinator. And maybe Belichick's boy who resigned the day before, retired the day before, retired from college football and comes to DC for Belichick in Atlanta. Nick Saban comes in and goes right into Georgia Bulldog country and brings the Atlanta Falcons.
That's pro wrestling booking right there.
That's also not happening, but I think it's a fun lane to go down.
Well, they can take, if they want to put a staff together quickly, they can take Patricia from the Eagles, please. Take them away. I mean, oh God. Okay, we'll get into the Eagles now because it's been bad. I'm wearing my new Christmas present jersey. Finally got a new jersey. It is Devontae Smith, not DeAndre Swift.
It looks like Andre Swift right now. There we go. All right.
Yeah, 06. Anyway, it's been a really bad month. I've been a fan. It's going on 2 months now. I've been a fan since 1990, so I've seen it all. Nothing really phases me. The one thing that gets to me is that, the people who come out and now they say, oh, look, we were right. Last year was a fluke, blah, 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 and all that crap. Other than that, I mean, it happens. But I was reading some interesting numbers about the Eagles collapse yesterday. Apparently, they're only the second team to ever start 10-1 in the Super Bowl era and not win the division. Oh, wow. Joining the 1986 New York Jets. That's the only other team.
Oh, God.
And of course, it had to be the Jets. They've been suffering for a long time. And they're also the only 10-1 team to not win at least 12 games in a season. The only one ever. So it's been, it's bad.
And it's not like they've added an extra game to the schedule either, Kelly, just to add on.
That's true. And thankfully, old coach Dougie P's Jacksonville Jaguars had an even bigger collapse than the Eagles, arguably, since they missed the playoffs. At least the Eagles made the playoffs. But it's going to be tough because their defense is as bad as they've ever had in my time as a fan. They can't stop anybody. Like they couldn't stop. It wasn't like they did lose, of course, to the Niners and the Cowboys, but then they lost to the Cardinals and the Giants in just embarrassing fashion. So it's not looking good. Actually, if they were playing better, playing the Bucs would be the most favorable wild card matchup because the Rams are hot and the Packers are hot, and those are the two other lesser teams. So the Eagles don't have to play them. But the way they're playing, the defense is playing, and Hurts' finger isn't right on his throwing hand. AJ Brown, they still haven't said what's wrong with him. He hurt his knee. Devontae missed the last game. DeAndre Swift missed the last game. So and then they have to string it out until Monday night, the very last game of the weekend.
Kelly, there's not a lot going on for us in our football teams, buddy. We might want to continue this episode just to give us some good stuff to go on here.
We could do, I know. I don't get to talk about it with too many people because my wife's not a fan of football. I don't have a huge group of friends here in Chilliwack like I once did when I was younger, living in Calgary, and we went to bars and watched sports almost every day. It seemed like, but anyway. Like I said, I've been through all the ups and downs, so this isn't going to crush me or anything. It'll be interesting to see what they can do for next year. There's no point in firing Sirianni. That would be, come on. I mean, the guys led them to 3 playoff seasons in 3 years, and you're going to can them and a Super Bowl appearance. That's just that. I mean, Philly, of course, the hardcore fans are overreacting to everything. But anyway, we'll see. I think they can beat the Bucs because the Bucs are definitely not a great team. But with the defense is just not. Yeah, the defense is just not good enough to stop anybody. It's sad to say.
We'll say Baker is beat up though. So, and can you believe that Baker Mayfield being the wild card of his health being just kind of the state of where you guys are at right now?
I know. It's anyway. Good thing
Oh,
it's not live.
yeah, my mother-in-law coming in the house hot right there. I might leave this in. But
She's upset about the Belichick being fired, right?
oh boy. But either way, buddy. Sad day, bad day for us. I think that
Yeah.
you guys could be okay this weekend, but you thought you would figure it out. And then there's a chance you guys might be going to Dallas in round 2. So that's a familiar foe. It's
Yes. If Detroit loses to the Rams and the Eagles win and Cowboys win, there's also the possibility that the Eagles win and the Cowboys and Lions lose, and the Eagles end up hosting a second round game. I wouldn't put it past the
Packers aren't
Cowboys.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Cowboys, knowing if you know their history in the last 25 years in the postseason, they've lost tons of games that they were hyped to win.
And that would be you guys facing the Rams, who's coming from the West Coast to the East Coast that already went to Chicago to Detroit the week before. So
no, but I don't know. There's parallels in my mind to the follow up to the Super Bowl season where they played the Bears in the playoffs and won with the double doink. I could see that being like a really sloppy slog of a game that the Eagles win on Monday. Unless their defense suddenly somehow by some miracle shows up, otherwise they're going to give up like 30 points again, and I don't think they're capable of keeping up.
If Baker Mayfield is not healthy, they're not going to score 30 points. It's going to be a struggle for them to score 30 points.
It could be a really ugly game for both sides. Who knows? Anyway, if they win, fine. That's I mean, losing is going to be, won't get to do anything about it for 8 months or whatever. That's always tough. But anyway, enough has been said. Hopefully when we get together,
we come around.
Yeah, when we get
around, it'll be around Super Bowl time. I'm sure I'll have a new head coach. Belichick will have a new home.
Yeah.
And you guys will probably be playing golf in Hawaii somewhere.
Playing golf and prepping for the draft too. Okay.
But the next episode is the NFL, Kelly. So
yes.
I'm excited for that one, and it's the end. And that's a sad day, bad day, but not as sad as bad day as today as Belichick was. But that's it for now, Kelly. You got anything as we get out of here, pal?
No, I'm good. Yeah. Next time's the finale with the NFL guys. And there's going to be some interesting names. There's going to be some interesting matches probably to talk about too. And it'll be fun. We'll go out on top. We'll talk about guys like honorable mention guys that we haven't discussed. There's a lot of guys to mention. I'm sure it'll be a big like jumbo-sized finale episode.
Yep, good stuff, Kelly. But for now, we will see you on the next one, buddy.